Beginning with this year's elections, voting gets a whole lot easier.
Your mailbox is your ballot box.
Your ballot packet comes to you in the mail.
But only if you're a registered voter. If you need to register or update your address, do it today at elections.hawaii.gov.
Look for your free Hawaii Elections Guide in the newspaper or at these locations statewide.
The deadline to register for the general election is October 5th, so don't delay.
Hawaii votes by mail.
Well, aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. This, of course, is Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Ryan Kalei-Suji, joined by Yunji Denise. We'd like to again thank our sponsor, the Office of Election. The general election is right around the corner. And for those who have not yet registered, you still have time. As that ad said, October 5th is that deadline. So you want to make sure that if you have not registered yet, that you go ahead and head over to the elections website so you can be able to get information on not only how to register, but how to vote. We'll have more information as we get closer to some of those deadlines, but certainly want to thank them for allowing us to have this discussion. And Yunji, today, as we continue to navigate through this COVID-19 pandemic, one of the areas, of course, that has been affected is our schools. And we're going to talk to two people who are on the ground right now and seeing firsthand how it's impacting our students.
Yeah, we really wanted to bring this discussion sort of to the ground level, if you will, and hear what is actually happening in our schools. We've brought two men together, two complex area superintendents, one from Hawaii Island and the other from here on Oahu, because the district is so, the state is so diverse, but it's all one school district. And so the experiences of the students are very different. So we wanted to have a conversation. Again, parents and anyone who's interested, please write your comments, your questions in the comments. Right now, we want to bring on Chad Farias from Hawaii Island and Bob Davis from here on Oahu. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here today. Bob, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your complex area. How many schools, how many students, and sort of how the last few months have been.
Well, I could speak for hours on that. The area I represent, and I'm very fortunate to be part of, is the Leilehua-Mililani-Waialua School District. We're considered the north side of the Central District. That Central District consists of 42 schools, and I have 20 schools. The 3 schools in Waialua, the 10 in the Leilehua complex, and 7 in the Mililani complex. You know, the community is very diverse in that it ranges from some of the rural areas in Waialua that have now kind of morphed into some higher property value areas because of the houses building up in the Mokuleia area, to the Leilehua complex that not only has old plantation roots, but it also consists of 4 schools that are on a military base. And then, of course, you have the more white-collar area in Mililani that has 7 schools. Little over 15,000 students in the 20 schools. And it's just rich with culture because of the diversity, and very, very fortunate to be part of this group.
Okay, and Keone, let's hear same question for you. Tell us a little bit about the schools that are under your leadership right now and how the last few months have been.
Yeah, aloha. Well, I've been area superintendent here in Kaʻu-Keaau-Pahoa for over 6 years now. It's 9 schools on the east side of Hawaii Island, stretching all the way down south, around South Point into Ocean View or the Mililani area. So just 9 schools, not a lot smaller than what Bob has in terms of numbers, but geographically it's probably 140 to 150 mile distance as the crow flies between schools. So it's been an amazing time. Unlike the fourth quarter, this first quarter has seen more professional development for our teachers who have stepped up to the plate. Many of them are just doing so well in providing this education from a distance. Most of them doing it from the comforts of their own classroom. We have a few students on campus, our most vulnerable students on all 9 campuses. So it's been a challenge to get to some of our families, but we've done that in numerous ways, providing mobile access or hotspots at various community organizations, churches, whoever wants to step in and help out. So it's just been an amazing time and a lot of learning.
You know, obviously with this distance learning comes, as you said, some of these challenges. I want to talk a little bit about some of the technology challenges in just trying to facilitate, allowing these students to have access to the internet. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe Bob, we'll start with you, about how you're sort of providing these resources for students that may not have the technology in their home, and what is being done to sort of make sure that they are receiving the information and instruction that they need?
That's always been a challenge, ensuring that we have equity amongst all of our students. And, Keone and I were speaking earlier, and he brought up a great point that we've always had equity challenges, and this has really put it to the forefront, which is a great thing. So I just happened to do a walkthrough this morning at a school campus that has high, free and reduced lunch rates. And what the administrator shared is how they passed out 450 devices to the students since summer. These are students that not only would not have a device at home, they would not have access to it. So whether it's Wi-Fi, Chromebooks, iPads, they got it. If the parents did not have a way of coming to pick it up from the school, they went out and delivered it. If teachers report that student A is not responding when they're supposed to be doing synchronous lessons, then the administrators and counselors jump in, they contact the homes, they try to find out what's going on, and they troubleshoot and work from there. To the extent that just this morning, they did home visits. They had already passed out a device. The device is not working. They go and swap out the device. The counselor sits with the parent and the child. They ensure that the device is hooked up. The counselor walks them through it at their own home. They make sure that they know how to log on. They put all the tabs up ready for action during the next class period. So the support is absolutely there from our schools. Really, we do have opportunity for all students to have access. Now, there's another challenge because there are some situations where the capacity of the child, they're unable to access. And those are the ones that we're really working hard to bring them on campus, because, we have an obligation, and it's a moral obligation that we feel to ensure that we can reach all students 100% of the time. And that's what we're working for.
And Keone, for someone like you, obviously, when you talk about just the scope of your district and location and the distance, so to speak, how has that access to technology been facilitated with so much geographical challenges in and of itself?
Right. So like Bob, ditto, that's happening in all of the schools. The granular size has become so small. Counselors and teachers have been going into homes, walking up and down subdivisions to handle devices. In terms of our geographically isolated areas, like specifically in Ocean View or down in Nana Valley, or some of our areas affected by the last lava flow where roads were crossed and aren't reestablished, it's been a little more of a challenge. So we've answered that this summer with the help of OITS and with Superintendent Kishimoto, offering up some funding for some mobile hubs. And we've been doing it for 4 months now, taking vans into communities, publishing it, passing out some snacks and food with the help of other partners. And these vans have charging devices. They have these MiFis that are on steroid. They're pretty fast internet access. And so we're getting out to various communities, and we're thankful for partners like St. Jude's Church and Hawaii County for use of the Parks and Rec lands, and getting the kids to come there. We set up tables and tents, and they access the information that way. The biggest challenge has been getting students to access asynchronous and synchronous lessons. So if we pass out MiFis, which we have, to areas in Ocean View where the MiFis don't work, kids would miss out on the synchronous part of the lesson. So we're so fortunate that our teachers were willing to teach synchronously and record themselves asynchronously while uploading assignments in Google Drive. And the flexibility has been amazing. We have conversations on attendance and grading, and in the end, why do we grade and why do we keep attendance? To make sure that kids are active and engaged. Why do we grade? So kids know what they're learning and we know what they're missing so we can provide supports.
We want to make sure that we bring in the audience. Jolisa has a question here. She says, how are the school complexes adjusting the implementation of school curriculum so that we are not overwhelming our students? I have 4 kids that are swamped in work and in jeopardy of failing because teachers are giving a year's worth of assignments in 1 semester. Keone, what's your take for Jolisa?
Yeah, so my advice to Jolisa would be to be in contact with schools and counselors. We have so many caring individuals on campus. They are providing, and it depends on the schedule. Some schools decided for in the spirit of having as much space to try to condense a year into a semester and then lessening the amount of courses. That hasn't been the case in my 9 schools, but I have reviewed that model and reaching out to counselors and teachers. I know most of the schools that I visited, and Bob visited a school today. I visited a community where there were some mobile access issues. And then it was great to reach out to what those mobile platforms are doing, where they're providing tutors and where they're providing educational assistance help in various locations. And all of the schools around the state are phasing into accepting more students on campus in what we started to call these hubs. And I don't want to get that confused with our mobile hubs. In essence, it's safe places on campus where students can come and access the internet and all of their passwords, codes, and oftentimes tutoring to help with their assignments.
What does that actually look like? Is that a school cafeteria? I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about the hubs?
Sure. So Keonepoko Elementary is probably my largest hub. When I went to visit, 40 kids came in and they social distanced and they spaced them out. But 40 was a good number. And this is a cafeteria that can hold 350 kids at a time. So they opened up more rooms. They opened up classrooms. And students are on various parts of campus. So you have 2 or 3 kids in various places with teachers and tutors to help.
I can add to that. Similarly, the school I'm at this morning, is a smaller elementary school of about maybe 450 students. And in the cafeteria was about maybe 25 students. There were EAs and PTTs supporting them. So there were a couple students that were working asynchronously, and the adults were in the room really supporting them with the work that they were to complete. And the remainder of the kids were actually working synchronously with the teachers who are conducting lessons, but either their home environment is such a way where it's not conducive maybe to being able to focus in on doing your lessons. Maybe there are multiple children in there doing lessons, or maybe they just wanted to be more connected with the school, so they came onto campus and did the work. Last week, I was at a much larger high school, and they had about 35 students in their cafeteria that were working synchronously with their teachers, just spread out for the same reason. So it's just wonderful to see that they still feel connected with their schools, and the schools are offering this opportunity.
I want to bring in another question. This one is from Marissa, and this is going off of Jolisa's question that we just posed, and she's saying that 2 different high schools in Maui are doing things so different, and both students at both schools are failing it. And I think this adds to the larger question of just overall flexibility in the curriculum and the way that things are being taught, because we know that each community and each school are doing things differently. How are you addressing sort of maybe the overall consistency in the curriculum and what is being taught, as well as but at the same time maybe allowing these teachers the flexibility to teach in the way that works best for them and their students? How do you address sort of the differences from school to school and from district to district?
Yeah, so Ryan, that question's a little more difficult to answer. I'll answer it from an elementary standpoint in our K-1-2, and that's very different from what we're doing in the high school. So for K-1-2, working in professional learning, teachers are working in professional learning communities to really isolate power standards. In this time when a child is struggling, you're not trying to push them to get too far ahead. What we're trying to do is make sure they're not falling behind. And so the specific question asked about a high school child being failing, our high school teachers that are doing the best in this distance learning are combining different standards together, being more broad in their assignments. And it really speaks to the ability of that teacher to look more worldwide in allowing kids to provide the information needed for grading. Again, I spoke about it earlier, grading should be done to inform the teacher and the student about progress made or supports needed. And so again, I would say reach out to the schools, every one of my schools, and I'm assuming or presuming this is the case around the state. It's just a bunch of caring individuals. We use the word vulnerable when we started talk about kids being allowed back to campus. And now we're transitioning, because that word has grown its own set of legs. We're transitioning to a staggered approach or based on student need. And one of the needs that has come up is for high school kids or a senior. A senior may not be vulnerable, may not have special needs or access issues, but could be in jeopardy of failing. And what does that do to a child that fails high school or drops out for their the earnings throughout their career. So they become automatically vulnerable in my book, or at least in the 3 high school principals that I talk to. And we're going to look for ways to provide access to ensure that they don't fail. At this time, if a child fails, they're choosing to fail because our people are there with open arms, ready to have this conversation and help.
Yeah, and similarly for our 3 high schools, you know, I've had the opportunity to visit them all. And one of the questions that I ask, if they don't come out and say it, is how are they reaching those students who may not be successful? And all 3 of them have done a wonderful job reaching out to their students and the families. Teachers report if kids are not regularly attending. Teachers report if students are not providing enough work coming back in that they can support it with a passing grade. And our schools are doing what they call maybe triage meetings, where they meet with the vice principal, counselor, teacher, and then they fold in the parent and the student. If necessary, they'll go to the home to ensure that everybody is informed. As like Keone said, you know, the hope is that if a student is failing, then really it's not for lack of effort on the school side. The school should be doing all that it can to ensure that our current situation is not going to be detrimental to our students for the next 30 working years that they're going to have in their life. So we should be doing all that we can. And from what I've been able to witness, it's happening. And I'm very proud of it.
I know it's not necessarily up to you, but I do want to ask Christy's question, which is there a timeline on phasing back to hybrid schools? So not necessarily full in-person learning, but giving students a little bit more about the in-person access that you folks were talking about. Bob, do you have any sort of idea of what the plan is? I know it's hard for you to project too far out because we don't know what's happening with reopening tourism and whatnot, but what are we looking at right now?
Well, you know, we get our guidance from the Department of Health. We're not the health experts. We're here to do what we can for the educational component in the state of Hawaii. So we take our guidance from the Department of Health, and then we need to move forward. You know, our school system is built for in-person learning. We can do virtual learning, and we've been doing it for decades for students that, you know, opt for that kind of extra credit opportunities. But now we're forced to do it for all. And it's been very challenging. And so knowing that it's added another layer of challenge for many of our students and our staff, that we really should be working to bring students back in a safe, orderly manner. So we take our guidance from the Department of Health. And as we're looking towards in the second quarter, our schools have been very well planned. All of the health and safety measures are in place. Their procedures are in place. And they're working towards starting the school in the second quarter like we are now to get our feet back on the ground, but really within the first few weeks, start working to bring more students on campus in a phase-in way. We know that based on the Department of Health metrics, we cannot have more than 50% of our students on campus. So we're going to take that into consideration and ensure that we don't violate any of that. So maybe we're going to have work towards 25%. Maybe some schools can work toward 40 or 50% of students on campus because they got to look at their facilities. They have to look at their demographics and get information from their parents and who's willing to bring their students onto campus. They got to look and ensure that they can have 6-foot distancing. They got to look and make sure that their staff are in a place where they feel safe and comfortable to actually carry out that instruction face-to-face. So all of those parameters come together as we work towards bringing kids on campus in the second quarter.
I mean, Keone, that's actually a really good point I'd like you to address is, do we have enough, or does your area, for instance, have enough teachers that if you were to go back full time, would you be able to implement those kinds of guidelines?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. Right now we're fully staffed. We're in one of the better situations in the last 7 or 8 years. Now, should teachers decide to take a leave or not want to come to work as we phase in to a face-to-face model, that would become an issue in terms of finding the necessary amount of substitute teachers willing to drive into our rural areas to do that work in our classrooms.
Okay, you know, one of the other things that we are seeing is just some of the concern maybe on the pressures of the teachers. And we want to talk a little bit about just everything that they're having to do. What are you hearing from those teachers in your districts in terms of the workload, obviously, that they're having to do? I mean, we're talking about them, of course, doing this distance learning virtually, also taping these messages, making sure that these students are getting the material and information that they need. What sort of things are you hearing from the teachers, and what sort of support is being offered to them right now?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll jump in there. When we're on campus, obviously the teachers that approach us that want to talk to us they have a strong opinion one way or another. What I've been getting is mostly positive. The hardest part for teachers is as we go back and forth with, we're going face-to-face, or we're going blended, or we're going hybrid, for them to understand how they can, not understand, but to really figure out how they can do asynchronous and synchronous. So when I spoke to a teacher last week about phasing in based on student need, more students, the teacher was so excited. And then she paused and was like, wait, so I have 6 of them in front of me and I'll be teaching live, and then I'll have the other 18 online? And I'm like, well, perhaps, right? Depends on our model. And she's like, oh, that's pretty daunting, yet exciting. So I think there's varying stories, but what I'm hearing most from my teachers are just excitement in, I can't believe I can do this, or I didn't think I could learn to do that. Uploading their documents in Google Docs, having students live and taping themselves for asynchronous, and then providing office hour and tutoring. So those stories sort of resonate with me the most. I won't lie, there have been some real strong opinions about, will you guys just make the decision already? Or when is this going to happen so I can plan? And we just don't know. As Bob said, we will look at the Department of Health metrics, use the CDC guidance, all the mitigation strategies, and we want to phase in as many students as we possibly can safely without scaring off the real frontline workers that have been doing this work for us the last 7-8 months.
Yeah, Bob, same question for you. What are you hearing from the teachers in your district?
Very similar from what Keone has. I think the learning curve was pretty steep. And so coming in through the summer and those first 9 days where they went through their training, kudos to the teachers and our EAs and the rest of the staff for really jumping in and doing an excellent job at really retooling their skill set so they can carry off their curriculum in this format. Just today, I watched a teacher that had 5 different devices while she was standing in front of all of them, navigating through that to ensure that she had student voice coming loud and clear, to ensure that she could watch her students as she would in the classroom, to ensure that she could share her screen so all students could see it, and to ensure that she could see the work of her students as they're performing it at their own homes. So it's pretty tremendous to see how incredible the learning has been on the adult side. I know that there is some anxiousness amongst everyone, our whole community, as we start to bring students in. But I also know that for the majority of the teachers that I've been in contact with, they absolutely know that it's better for the students to be in the seat. So although they're doing far and above anything that I would have expected in a distance learning format, it is still not ideal when you compare it to face-to-face. So that's why we are pushing to see if we can get more students on campus face-to-face safely.
And to that point, Stella has a rather long comment at 10:47, but she's basically saying virtual learning is fantastic. My kids will not be returning to the classroom until I say it is okay. If they hold in-person learning before it's safe, we'll call in sick and do the work from home. How long do you anticipate this being, a model that you'll offer both systems? How long can you actually do that? Bob, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, I'm pretty certain that for the remainder of this school year, we are going to offer that 100% distance learning format. Again, it's not ideal. And once we start bringing students back onto campus, our families have to understand that our focus really needs to be with the students who are on campus, because that's what we're designed to do. We are going to have effort towards the families that opt in to be 100% distance learning. But the understanding is that, that is meant to be independent work to self-motivated students that hopefully have some support at home. So there will be check-ins, I have counselors that are ensuring that emotionally the students are doing okay. We have teachers that are assigned to check in on the students. Some schools give teachers maybe 30 or 60 minutes to ensure that they have an opportunity of time to check in on those students that will be 100% distance learning. But the primary focus will be on the students that are going to be face-to-face.
Keone, what's your take on that, especially because you're dealing with a lot of families who have very, very long commutes, some of these students having to be in the car an hour or more each way. There might be some families who decide that this is better for them to do the distance learning model.
Right. Similar to Bob's answer, I think we didn't do as well a job early on communicating that option to families and getting maybe confused on distance learning versus the distance option in our return to learn model. But like Bob, I see that the entire year, parents that have opted for that distance learning for the rest of the year, our schools will honor that. And I know our principals are very excited that that is an option. And now we're starting to have conversations about if or when or normalcy returns. How do we continue this platform for those families? Some of our schools in Kaʻu or in the Farias communities, you know, they experience 40 to 50% chronic absenteeism. That is 50% of our kids missing more than 15 days a year, and that's often because of transportation issues or weather issues, or if a child is sick, or if a parent has to take a child to the doctor, they take all 3 kids out of school. And so the second part of your question, I hope it never ends. I hope this virus is contained. I hope we get to normalcy for those that need it. Like Bob said, our kids need to be face-to-face. We need to check on their mental health. But in terms of learning what we learned about distance learning and offering that to parents, I hope that never ends. That should have started a long time ago. It shouldn't have taken a pandemic for us to kind of loosen up some of that, not the rigor of teaching, but the standard or the measure in which we measure progress or standards-based grading.
You know, our time is wrapping up here, but we do have an interesting question that's kind of a sidebar, as he says. Randy's asking about what is a policy now for community groups that want to resume renting school facilities, specifically for outdoor activity during the weekends. We know that, of course, school campuses are used, of course, to instruct, but many other community groups have used this for various different gatherings. What is sort of the policy right now for some of those that are, you know, really rely on schools outside of the learning?
Well, many of our campuses do. They rent out facilities to all kinds of different organizations, and oftentimes it's a cafeteria, maybe the library, maybe classrooms, and like in the question said, maybe some outdoor spaces. For right now, we are not allowing outside organizations because we do have to prioritize the health and safety of the individuals who are working on the campus. When we bring outside individuals onto a campus, we have to be very mindful that they may or may not be following safe guidelines when they're away, and who knows what they're bringing. They don't come under our direct supervision. Therefore, we don't necessarily have, say, an administrator on site who can say, hey, you should be wearing a mask, or hey, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. And therefore, we feel that if we are not in full control of the individuals that are using the spaces, then we have to ensure that they're all properly cleaned and sanitized upon their leaving. And we don't necessarily have the resources to ensure that that's going to get done on a regular basis for the many facilities that people want to use.
Okay. Well, you know, as we sort of wrap up here, we kind of always like to allow you to kind of share your final thoughts. And I would love for each of you to kind of just share what you think the path forward looks like, right? As we look ahead into this next year, it's crazy to already start talking about 2021, but the remainder of the school year, what does that sort of look like for you? And what would your message be to those parents out there who may be watching and looking for some sort of semblance of normalcy and what the future looks like in your districts? Keone, we'll start off with you.
Okay, mahalo. You know, a final message would be just a huge mahalo to all of the employees in the Kaʻu-Keaau-Pahoa complex area and all of Hawaii Island and all of the state of Hawaii. Message to the parents would be to stick with us, to reach out to your school. We want to hear from you. We want to know how your child is doing. The mental condition or mental health of your child is much more important than education right now, but we'd like to find a balance in doing both. I hope that this pandemic is under control sooner than later, and we start to see more kids phase in Q2 and Q3 and Q4. We want to make sure that that they have confidence that we have our mitigation strategies under control in cleanliness, in ventilation, and in wearing of masks. But overall, we just want, the message is that we want to show the love to our keiki. We want them back as soon as we can. And if we can't, and you're in a distance model, please reach out to us. We have resources. They're not, you know, we're not using all of our resources. We still have more to give. And so please reach out to us, and we can't wait to see your keiki.
Bob, and the same for you.
Sure. I think, you know, Keone said it excellent. You know, the first thing has to be thanks to the individuals. You know, I've been able to see our campuses, and once again, you know, I've just been in awe with how serious they've been taking ensuring that they give the highest level of education to the students that come under them, and I'm just so proud of the effort for administrators, our teachers, and the rest of the staff. Secondly, I always ask that, you know, let's not forget all that we've learned through this, and let's not forget the innovation that we've been able to come up with. We're forced into it, but let's not forget it, and let's take forward what we've learned and ensure that we don't continue to do education like we did pre-pandemic. We know that we're predominantly a face-to-face institution. However, we should have resources for those students that tend to thrive in this environment, you know, because why haven't we offered this kind of environment to more of our students if it fits? So I would ask that we not forget that. And the last thing, you know, and Keone touched it right just perfectly, is, you know, we ask for your patience because none of us have done this before. And we're really pushing on our educators hard. They have a lot to accomplish. They've learned tremendously. They're working incredibly hard. They care for our keiki. They really know that what we do in schools affects our community. And we're really here for the health and safety of our kids. We're predominantly here to ensure that they are achieving and they're prepared for the world. But we also ask that if there's some consideration, a little bit of patience, because DOE is Department of Education. It cannot be a department of everything. We cannot absorb all the responsibility for the community. So maybe just a little bit of patience, I kindly ask for.
We can use that no matter where we are in this pandemic. Thank you so much. Thank you both for being here and sharing your perspective. We really appreciate, you know, the ground level view of what's actually happening in our schools. So thank you both for being here.
Aloha. Thank you.
Okay, Ryan, well, really interesting to hear about how, you know, you've got a very rural area on the Big Island there, and then you have a much more diverse sort of set of experiences here on Oahu. So interesting to hear how they're both doing that. It sounds like there's actually a lot more in-person learning than was my impression to start. The idea that you have 40, 50 kids in a cafeteria for 300, so that the kids are kind of learning simultaneously, some at home and some in person. That has to be very challenging, though, for the teachers who are having to manage both of those at the same time.
You know, and I thought it was interesting to note and the reoccurring message of that this could be something that's implemented in the future. Obviously, this is not something that the department has planned for, obviously, but something that they've learned from in terms of potentially moving forward with a model that would allow for those who may not feel comfortable for a while sending their children back to schools and finding a way to expand upon this sort of distance learning in the future and making it part of the curriculum. And just hearing the logistics of how these technologies and how these students are going to parks in different parts, especially on Hawaii Island, where the community is so spread out. There obviously is a lot of planning and organization that has to go on in terms of providing access to these lessons and technology that you sometimes don't even think about, but it obviously has to be done.
Absolutely. I mean, he was talking about how, you know, one of the areas that he represents, that Keone represents, is in Ocean View, where they have no Wi-Fi. And so they've actually had to drive mobile units in there, as you said, set up in a park or, you know, a community space, let the students come, upload their documents, and then they can go home. That is very, very difficult. And it's amazing to see what they've been able to do. Also interesting to see all of your comments, such a wide variety of experiences. Some parents saying they really love the way virtual learning has been happening, and other parents really hoping that they get back to in-person as soon as possible. So we appreciate both of them for being on, and we appreciate all of you for participating. On Friday, Ryan, we're going to pivot to another sector of the economy that's really been hard hit with all the shutdowns, and that's fitness.
That's right. We are looking forward to, again, Spotlight Hawaii is about putting a spotlight and shining the light on some of those in our community. And certainly the fitness community is one of those that is suffering right now. A lot of gyms have been forced to shut down. Of course, we know under the current order in the city and county of Honolulu that, outdoor only outdoor exercises is allowed. And so gyms remain closed under this Tier 1 program. And some of these gyms have had to modify and have had to find ways to adjust during this time. We're going to talk to some gym owners about how they are coping with some of these new rules and implementations, and how they are actually trying to get the mayor and the city to sort of change that approach in this tiered system specifically for the fitness community. So looking forward to that conversation and continuing on to hear from what people are experiencing as a direct result of how COVID-19 is impacting their lives and their businesses.
Yeah, and then next week we will be talking to the mayor himself about his system and how he thinks it's working and why he's chosen the restrictions that he has put in place. And we're also going to be talking to John DeFries from the Hawaii Tourism Authority. We're really excited to talk to him about how tourism is pivoting at this time, and then of course about reopening on October 15th. So we've got a lot of great guests ahead for the month of October. We are looking forward to that conversation with all of you. Good news for Ingrid Peterson, who has been asking us a lot about Oceanic, and we are going to have the CEO of that company come on talking about the Assure 19 testing. That, of course, is the saliva test that they're developing. Very exciting technology. When would something like that be available? How foolproof is it? Ingrid, when we get a little closer, we'll let you know the date, because we know that you've been asking for that. And let us know your, everyone else, let us know who you want to hear from. This really is your forum. We bring on leaders from all aspects of the community, and we'd love to know who you want to hear from.
That's right. So we're looking forward to another month of conversations and getting you the information that you need during this time. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, the Office of Election, for allowing us to have this conversation. Again, if you have not yet registered for the general election, October 5th is the deadline. You can head over to elections.hawaii.gov for more information and to sign up. So until Friday, we will wish you all a great rest of the week. We'll see you right back here on Friday at 10:30 here on Spotlight Hawaii. Aloha.
Aloha.